Hello and welcome to Black, Brown, and Bilingue, where our mission is to unite the Black and Brown communities through education, storytelling, and community engagement. Hello and welcome in to yet another episode. We are here in season 2, and we have just a guest of honor with us today. Today we have Mr. David Mohammed. He is an educator from out of Kansas City. Not only an educator, but also a musician, a hip hop artist. And the way we actually came to know him is through some work that he did on his classroom and some conversation with his students surrounding the Confederate flag and its significance in modern America. And so we want to welcome him in today. Thank you, David, so much for joining us. And we look forward to learning more about you today.
Yeah, I appreciate the invite. Glad to be here.
So, David, can you, again, we mentioned it, and in fact, we've had a whole episode in season 1 on hip hop. We're both huge hip hop fans. Where did your passion for hip hop come from? Where did it all start for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was very organic, you know. It was the music of the community I was in. I mean, and I grew up, honestly, as one of the only in my neighborhood. I mean, I grew up in a predominantly white schools from 3rd grade up. And so then when I gravitated naturally towards the other Black and brown faces that I would see, and that was the music of the community. And in a home, you know, it was a lot of soul music and things of that nature. But like, I think from there, I just had a lens towards like the more what people may call conscious hip hop music that just seemed to fit my personality more. You know, I think music is a feeling and it's an emotion, and so the emotions that came through that lane of hip hop is what I was really just gravitating towards as a light-skinned Black kid in the burbs. You know what I'm saying? And so, I mean, I played the violin, I sang in choir, I did other things. So I was always very musical, but hip hop just, it gave me the outlet for the emotion that other music didn't. And so, yeah, that's just what it's always been. And I mean, you know how it is. You're trying to rap at the lunch table with your homies, and at the, you know, out in the recess when Bone Thugs and Harmony Crossroads, we was trying to rap it. We didn't know what we were saying. Yeah. You just made the sounds, you know. I was like, well, if I go fast enough, people gonna think I know it, you know. So that was the vibes, you know what I mean? And burning CDs and making cassettes, and just, yeah, that was the energy.
When did you realize that you had bars? Like what a moment that you can point to, or like, hey, I can do this?
I would say high school. Like I always wrote and messed around and stuff, but like I was a very poetic kid. Like I love poetry and that kind of vibe. And so I think that with the fact that, like, being honest, like I was well educated, you know, like my parents put me in good schools, you know, they read to me as a kid. Like I had a good education. My father was very much you know, he was in the Nation of Islam, and then he converted to Orthodox Islam and was a preacher in our mosque. And so I just came up with a lot of like words and content to take, you know, and to use. And so there was like a talent show in high school, and some friends were gonna like break dance and do some other stuff. And I just wrote a verse, you know, it was actually inspired by Big L, late Big L. And like people were like, oh, that's dope, you know? And so when you hear other people say you're nice, like that's like the motivation. I look back and the verse was probably whack as, you know, whack as hell. But like in that little setting, like they thought I was good, and that motivates you. And, you know, then in college, I did a lot of spoken word, but my spoken word was really like my raps, because I had, I didn't have anywhere to record. I didn't really have those kind of connects. And I was watching Def Poetry a lot, which most Def used to host on HBO, and he would have like rappers on there. He had Kanye West
Kanye
on.
West, I remember
Yeah,
that.
and I was like, yo, like I didn't. That was before Kanye was like Kanye, but like he would always have like a rapper on there who would essentially spit a verse, but in poetic form. And I was like, I can do that. And it just, so then when I got on spoken word stage, just people were like, oh, you're nice, and it's deep. So that's just kind of where it just kind of kept going.
Yeah, I gotta say, David, I definitely relate to that idea growing up out in the burbs. My hometown, before doing some redistricting, you had schools that were, 95% white and other schools that were, 40% African American. And so I remember actually making that transition from the side of town where I was going to school with mostly white kids to the side of town where I was going to school with a lot more blacks and brown students. And like, I had culture shock. I was like, hold on, what's going on,
Yeah.
But I think that hip hop, that music piece was one of the ways that connection happened, right? That because my older brother was listening to the same music that their older siblings were listening to, and so I could jump right in and meet you at the crossroads. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's real.
So I think that's definitely impactful. I'm wondering, as an educator as well, do you connect hip hop into education? Is that something, are your students aware that you can spit? And I ask because, as I mentioned, before we started this episode, I tend to write for fun. I kind of write, PBIS songs and things like that. And I think honestly, I write for fun because I'm scared to put real effort into it and have somebody say it's not good, So, but anyways, that's
me. I'll always humble you real quick.
But I'm not worried about the haters, though. Yeah. So, anyways, David, tell me, how does that work as a hip hop artist cross over into your work as an educator?
Yeah, for me, my students. So the school I taught at mostly before I left was a predominantly white high school in a very affluent part of town, and the kids there, I think, were first just excited to have a black teacher. Like I was the only black teacher in the school, let alone the only Muslim teacher in the school, and so at that point when I first started teaching, I wrote stuff, and I would do like first day of this year raps, end of the year raps. And they would always be like, "Whoa," And then I had a student group that I was a sponsor of, which was like a student humanitarian group. We always threw a benefit concert where like student bands would come out, and I would get up there and like spit a verse or something like that just to like have fun. But like you, like I never really took it serious until I heard the Roots album Undone. And so Undone, for whatever reason, just sparked my creative I was like, oh my God, this concept album. And then right after that, To Pimp a Butterfly came out. And I was like, okay, before I leave this world, I want to put out a serious project. Like I actually want to do this. And my students were a motivation for me, because I looked at them and I was like, okay, of course they had affluence, but like they weren't afraid to say yes to trying new things. So like you'd have a varsity football player be in a play, and he also played the guitar and sang and put out a CD and stuff and put it on Spotify. And I'm like, dang, like when I was 17, 18, I was like too afraid to let my black friends know I played the violin, and like regretted not going further with that kind of stuff, or like regretted not doing a play just for the heck of it, and so when I started to take it more serious, I kind of was like, okay, well, I'm going to use this community. And so on my first album, I had features from students. Like there were like on the opening song, there was two girls who sang on it. And
that's dope.
One of the guys in my class played guitar on a song for me. And then like the next year I put out like a series of tracks called the School Days Project, like a play on the movie School Days. And it was like each track had a feature with a kid who I was like, okay, you say you can rap, you say you can spit, I'm gonna give you a chance we're gonna be on the track together, and so I did that. So yeah, they always knew I could rap. And I had like artwork that was made by like a cover art was always made by students and stuff like that. So I always leaned in on students, and it was a great place to also get like, is this dope or not? Like based on they're in the culture, like even though it was a lot of white kids, like they're the ones buying the tickets going to the
Consumers, yeah.
they're the consumers for sure. And so I would be like, yo, how does this sound? And even since I've left that class and school and I'm at a different school now, like when I put out a music video, these kids was like, whoa, like, and so it was always something that I used them as like a sounding board and as inspiration, to be honest, like just to kind of like, you only have so much time on this earth, right? So like, I may not ever like reach the status of a Black Thought and have my album heard by millions, but like, I want to have something that can be there, legitimately. And that's what's inspired me to continue making projects.
That is so inspirational. So you talked about you were the only in this school. Maurice and I have been in situations where we were the only, and we know a lot of the feelings and the emotions that can come out of that. What were the parents' responses to you? And can you speak to not only, because you're a Black man, but you're also Muslim, and you're also infusing hip hop into your education. So what was parents' response to that?
I think they were confused. Y'all seen Get Out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that vibe of like at the lunch lawn party or whatever, where he feels like everybody's watching him and he's like this spectacle. Sometimes it felt like that, to be real. Like I always felt like I was being watched. Again, it was a very affluent neighborhood. And I felt like I was like this, for some parents, I was like this thing they could hold up as like, look at this guy.
Exceptionalism.
Yeah, he's unique, like let's invite him to this fundraiser, or like when it was a graduation party for a student and I would get invited, and it was like, this is Mr. Mohammed, their favorite teacher, or like they would reach out to me with like, and they still do, with like really deep questions. Like when all the like George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, what are your thoughts?
Yes.
Like and I'm not even teaching there anymore, but like, I became a go-to face and voice for them. And sometimes that put pressure on me to feel like, yo, like, what do you want from me here? Like, what is this for? Where are you going with this? Especially when you see like the dynamic of a household where, and I'm gonna just call it out, where in many cases, the wife was very much leaning in more on the liberal, trying to stay woke, at least performatively. And then the father was like, yeah, you can go do that, but I'm still voting this way. This is where the money's coming from. And so the dads kind of just watched me from afar, and I think there was sometimes pushback, like because I would bring up certain things. I became involved in like our first diversity and inclusion committee at the school. And so there was always like some kinds of pushback, like, where are you trying to take our community? And then when I saw like who was involved from the parent community in our diversity and equity committee, it was always the moms. It was always the white moms. It was never the fathers, right? And so like, there was this dynamic of, was that their escape to like delve into that world? But when they went home, it was like, that's not the reality. We had a march in the city where the school was at, which is like unheard of. They had a march for Black Lives Matter. The majority of the people you saw out, other than students, were white mothers, and so it's just like this dynamic of like only being able to go so far with how much they're going to be involved. And so because of that, I never quite knew how honest it really was. And I knew I was one mistake away from it completely going the other way. And so that pressure that we all face as people of color in every space, where you truly don't feel like you can be your authentic self, even amongst colleagues, like I got along with many of them, but it was like to a certain extent. Like I didn't feel like I could like really let my guard down or just be, you know what I'm saying? And And that's exhausting. That's an exhausting way to live when everywhere you go, you're super conscious of how you're being seen and how that contradicts what you see. And so that's the W.B. Du Bois calls it the double consciousness. I feel like I have a triple consciousness as Black Muslim American, and it's just the way that it is, sadly. But that's what I definitely felt teaching in a school like that.
Wow. You hit on so many topics. Like me and Maurice, we often talk about, there's almost this awe when people meet him. Like they're almost like, wow, they feel good about themselves. This is like white people. They feel good about themselves for liking Maurice. Right. It's not so much like, are you for the cause really? Or is this for you yourself to say, look, I'm not racist. I love Maurice. And, that notion of exceptionalism, that's very real.
And it takes away from, it takes away from who Maurice is, right? Because it becomes less about who he is and who he's worked himself to be, and more about how they can compliment themselves and applaud themselves for being so woke and so down. It's like, well, I'm the one, whatever the case may be. Yeah.
It's funny you say that. I literally just had a conversation yesterday, and Illinois has recently passed culturally responsive teaching and leading standards, and I was talking with a colleague about those, and again, she was sharing with me how upset she was because her family pastor at church had asked the church to pray that the state not pass these standards. And she was expressing how upset she was. And when she talked to this pastor, the pastor hadn't even read the standards, had just read on some conservative, blog post that they were bad, and so had made this statement. And as she was talking about how upset she was as a white woman, I sat there and I thought to myself, how often I've been a shoulder for some person to cry on because they're so upset about racism. And I'm sitting here like, oh, you're upset.
Making it about them. Yes, making it about them.
And I don't think she meant that. I think she was being sincere, but it was just something that did cross my mind as I thought about that. So I appreciate that reflection.
What's interesting is like, one, and I want to, if any of them listen to this, like, I know that those moms were sincere, like you were talking about, like they had good hearts. The question is, like, to what extent are they willing to go to become uncomfortable? Because like that woman that you're talking about, is she going to leave the church, right? Like, are you so upset about it that you're going to take your money and your time away from that community and go somewhere else where it could be better served, right? And many of them are not willing to get that uncomfortable. So they're willing to do it in moments, right? They're willing to go to the march or the rally because whatever reason, but are they willing to leave their jobs or challenge their spouses or challenge their country club communities, and say, you know what, I'm not going to associate with you guys anymore if this is how you move in the world. And a lot of times they're not willing to go that far. So they want to do just enough for the post, or they want to do just enough to kind of like escape. And then they know they go back into that world. And I'm not saying they need to divorce their husbands or whatever, but like, there has to be some kind of disruption, or it's all just performative. And if you're not willing to disrupt, then what are you coming to me for?
Yeah. It was interesting. She did say, she said, I'm not at a place yet where I feel like I need to leave because I'm seeing the changes happen. That pastor had emailed her back a few days later and was like, hey, I read them. I'm sorry. I'm so glad you challenged me on this because otherwise I would not have, done my homework that really was necessary.
That's great.
I think I was definitely impressed by that because she did go through the discomfort. Most people don't like confrontation, right? But she was willing to confront somebody and say, no, what you just said and did was wrong. So,
absolutely.
I think part of what we're talking about here is really that discipline, right? That you have to have that discipline if you're going to be a part of this walk, a part of this journey towards social justice, towards equity. And not allow it to just be that hashtag, because it was trending. When you look at last spring and summer, that was the trendy thing to do. Hey, I'm here. They posting, TikToks and Snapchats from the march talking about I'm here, but is it trendy or is it work?
Right.
So I bring up the discipline piece because we, in our research, David, we found out that you also are a karate student. Is that correct?
I'm an instructor. Yeah.
A
And a
karate
student.
instructor. Okay,
Yeah.
and a student. So I'm listening to you, David, and I'm like, he's a violinist. He's
Not
singing in the
anymore.
choir. He's a hip hop artist. He's an educator. He's an instructor in the realm of karate. Talk to me about, how do all these things mix? Mainly, what karate and hip hop, do you see a connection there?
Oh yeah.
For you, what was that connection?
Well, first martial arts for me is like the root of everything. My father's a martial arts instructor. So I grew up, I started taking classes formally at the age of 3 in my dad's dojo. And so that's what sparked my desire to teach martial arts because, both my father and mother were always like, what can we do for the community? So my father started teaching martial arts in the mosque for free initially. And then he started charging like $15 a month. When I was a kid, I think tuition was like $35 a month. It was always in the urban core. We had kids who came in from families who, were like, we don't have any money. So we help them out. They couldn't get karate uniforms. We find out a way to help them out. My mom would help pay kids tournament fees, so I saw that juxtaposition from like, by that point we had moved to the suburbs. So we would drive down here to this community, where, our dojo was, and then I would go back. And so I saw like immediately, I'm privileged in many ways, right? I got both parents in the home, and the art for me, the martial arts was always my realm of outlet, of emotion. At the age of 9, my dad started having me help teach martial arts. And so I would teach kids and adults. And that's what sparked me to go into the classroom. And so, as I got older, I knew I wanted to keep the martial arts tradition going for my family. And so I felt like studying education was going to be a way to make me a better martial arts instructor. And so that's why I did that. And so to this day, me and my father, we run a martial arts school. I do that full time in the evenings. I teach martial arts. But with hip hop, I think martial arts is extremely connected. You look at groups like Wu-Tang, you know what I'm saying? And even like Kung Fu Kenny, Kendrick Lamar, like there's always been this vibe of the other world realm skill set, fighting off oppression and whatever may have you. And I think like when you look in Black and brown communities, you had Saturday afternoon Kung Fu theater and you had Bruce Lee. And I think just there's something about trying to be a badass, that you see in the martial arts movies that it aligns with hip hop, right? Because, hip hop is like, okay, I come from nothing or I don't have this or that, but I can kill you with these words, right? And so I'm gonna verbally assault you, right? And that's where the battle comes from. I think the martial arts is like the physical manifestation of what a lot of guys wanted to feel as hip hop artists. And so if you look at a lot of your favorite hip hop artists, they are very connected with martial arts. There's just something about the vibe of the two. And for me I've competed, I teach, I train. Hip hop is what I use to get myself in the vibe. So when I'm working out, I'm using hip hop. When I'm warming up for a competition, I'm using hip hop. And when I'm making my hip hop tracks, a lot of times I go into the same mindset that I get to when I'm about to have like a fight, like when I'm about to compete. I get into the same like, all right, where am I psychologically? And so, actually, it's a project I'm working on right now, which is going to be based on like a variety of 80s martial arts movies. The only real heads would know. So we'll see what people think of it.
That's awesome. When you said hip hop and martial arts, I love Martin, and I thought of Dragonfly Jones. Do you know?
Yes. 100%.
And
100%.
yeah, I've seen that overlap too. Now, where are you teaching now? Are you in a different community? Is it more diverse? Like, can you talk and what propelled you to leave the school that you were at to where you are now?
Yeah, so I left my current school, my old school in 2019. I was just at a point where I was like, it had been 11 years. I didn't want to be a principal. I really wanted to do more like diversity, equity work and have a position to do that. But the way the district wanted to do it was to have one person over the entire 15,000 student district. And I was like, yo, I'm not going to do that.
It's a
The
setup.
guy who, yes, a lot, and the guy who was gonna like kind of help hire it was actually my former principal. We had worked together, so he had told me like, David, I want you to go for this position. I pitched the alternative idea. I was like, I think there should be one person in every high school that can like focus on their feeder community, and it just wasn't financially feasible, or that's not where they wanted to put their dollars, is what I would say. And so I left. I was like, I'm seeing where this is going. I'm putting more energy in this than in the classroom. Another opportunity came my way, and I went into the nonprofit world for a year. And it was in the education realm, but it gave me a chance to see like the whole educational landscape of charter schools that I didn't know anything about. And I worked in like 8 different schools, and that wasn't really the best fit either for me. And so then I left that with the idea that I was going to go and teach martial arts full time, and do like equity training and consulting on the side. And we now have a nonprofit through our martial arts school, which is like leadership. And so I was like, okay, I'll get that going. Boom, COVID hits. And so then the martial art, our dojo had to go virtual. We're losing students, and I'm like, okay, I got 2 kids and a wife. So I was doing some contractual work to pay the bills. And a friend of mine who works for a really big foundation up here called Kaufman, she reaches out to me and she says, David, there's this charter school. It's all girls. It's their second year in inception, and they really want like an enrichment PE type teacher. And she knew I had done girls self-defense seminars, and I had done virtual PE and all this stuff. And she was like, you should go for it and just see what happens. And so I pitched to them the idea of an enrichment class that was based on martial arts, at this all girls school, and they went for it. And so I'm an enrichment teacher, but I teach martial arts and it's just right now it's just 5th and 6th graders in the school. It's all girls. It's probably about 80% Black. And then there's a large Latinx population as well. There's probably like 5 white kids in the whole school. And so I don't think it's diverse in that aspect, right? Like it's just flipped. But it's been super unique because I've been virtual the whole year. I've never met the girls in real life. I've never met my principal in real life. I've never taught from the building. And with COVID and everything, it's been a highlight on the disparities and the inequities in education, right? So like I've got kids, I've never seen them on camera. I've never heard their voice. They've never turned in an assignment. They come on Zoom, their name's on the screen, and that's as far as it gets, and you can imagine being a 5th or 6th grade kid and like some teachers coming on the screen and being like, yeah, we about to do some push-ups and burpees and some kicks. And there's a few kids who like it, and there's a lot more who are like, yeah, I don't want to do this. And so it's been an interesting dynamic. At this point, I do plan on, returning next year with them, and hopefully in person, and we'll see what that changes. But I don't know. I've also kind of looked into some other realms too, because teaching is exhausting, as y'all know. Like it's, whew,
And that point too, that like it's even harder when you don't get that feedback from the kids if their cameras are off. When I facilitate staff meetings, I see my staff and they're like, I've met them in person, but if I am facilitating a meeting and I'm not getting that feedback where they're just quiet watching, it is extremely draining and you second guess yourself a lot.
Yes.
I don't know, Maurice, if you've had that experience, and that made me think, like, that's what our teachers are going through with students who all you see is a black box in their name.
Yeah, and you can imagine trying to teach a physically involved class where I'm like, all right, let's go. And they're like nothing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
that's hard.
They're just looking at you on the screen. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So it's been a unique journey. I really do value the school. It's a school it's the first all girls public charter school in Kansas City. They're founded upon feminism and anti-racism. So like they're really open about infusing that. So I think it's super dope. If I'm being honest, I'm trying to figure out like what my place is in the future there. But at this moment, I really do appreciate what they've done for me and the opportunity.
That sounds super interesting. And I think I'd love to learn some more about that. Just looking at different ways that schools can serve our communities, particularly within the Black and Brown community, and looking at, perhaps what are different needs that exist there, right, than that may be coming just from the public school in general. So I love that idea. David, I know we've talked through just the idea of hip hop and education. I want to turn back for just a moment to again some of the work that you're doing around hip hop. Um, and Lisette had asked you earlier about maybe what was kind of some of the response of parents. Um, what do you think, as you think about hip hop, what do you think are maybe some of the biggest misconceptions surrounding hip hop and the music that really, like you said, I think it has become a culture in and of itself, right? What are some of those misconceptions?
I think people don't realize how diverse hip hop is. You know, um, you know, it's definitely broader than what is seen on the public lens. And it's the depth beneath is way bigger than what's above, right? And so now in an accessible world where Spotify and iTunes and all these things, you can find the hip hop that you want to hear. You just got to work a little bit, and you really don't have to work as hard as you used to. When I was a kid and we didn't have streaming and such, I had to like go to Best Buy or wherever else. And especially in a city like Kansas City, like where I'm not on the coast and we get all of that. And I would have to look at album covers to try to figure out if they were like about what I was about. I look at song titles, and that's how I stumbled across Little Brother and stumbled across The Roots and Most Def and Talib Kweli and Common, because I was like, oh, this album is called Like Water for Chocolate. That's definitely probably not about like violence and like misogynism. You know what I mean? And like Black Star, and on the back of it, it's talking about like, the power of the Black woman. And I'm like, okay, this is what I'm down for. Like, this seems like what I'm about. And I could probably play this loud enough to where my parents wouldn't be like, what are you listening to? Now you have, it's just so immense how much is out there, to the point where it can be exhausting and overwhelming because it's just so much music. And so for people who maybe critique hip hop, I say, well, which hip hop are you listening to? Because there's a lot. And most of it is a lot more diverse than we give it credit. And I want to say, like, don't look past the music that you've been listening to and assume that it's so clean and perfect, right? Like, rock music has you have Ozzy Osbourne and then you have John Mayer, and there's room for all of it. You know what I mean? And I think that we have to start recognizing that hip hop should be allowed the same, what's the word I'm looking for? It should be allowed the same room to have its varied personalities. I heard one of my favorite rappers, Rhapsody, talk about it. They asked her like, well, as a conscious hip hop artist, and she said, no. Like she said, everybody's a conscious musician. You're just talking about the consciousness of whatever you see the world through. So if I'm Cardi B and my consciousness is the fact that I used to be a stripper and live in this world, that's what my consciousness is, right? Whereas, I look at Pasta News of, De La Soul, his consciousness is going to be much different because he's well educated and had a different upbringing than someone else. And so we're all talking about whatever we're conscious of. And hip hop is just as, expansive as all these other arts as well. So I challenge anyone who says they don't like hip hop to like come listen to the catalog of hip hop that I'm listening to, and I think I can turn you a little bit.
I love that. That's so well said, that each of us are conscious. We just are conscious of what we are conscious of, right? I mean, yeah. And so then we're speaking to that part of our story. I think that's a very powerful thought. So, David, we would be remiss if we had you on and did not ask you to spit a little something for us. And this is the way that we normally try to work it. We always end our episodes with interviewees. We say, what's one thing that you would want the listener to walk away with? And we would love if you maybe there's a verse you already got that you're thinking of right now. Maybe you need to run and grab your notebook because it's something you just scribbled.
I'm ready.
Just okay, perfect. Drop something on him.
Off the top, he is ready. Not like you, Maurice, that you got it right. And I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
No. All right. Pops told me closed mouths don't get fed, and birds in the sky don't get bread, and every good wife deserves cred. Turn lemons into yellow cake, water in the Kool-Aid, don't know flavors, just the color's name. Watching VHS in second grade, couldn't memorize our sewers but knew NBA. Dreams of money off of rookie cards, comics in the plastic covers, fingerprints with resultant scars. Grandma prayed on plastic covers, crucifixion scars. Niggas pray to Jesus every day, selling dope in cars. So the dreamer looking dope in cars. Same machine that have them buying lies that they should learn to cope with bars. Why I bring you broader scope than only hoes and cars. Medicine injected in the candy, Mary Poppins bars. Poppins Annie bars, youngins think they master fate. Claim they catching fish, but only masturbate. Say they wanting all the smoke, only vape. Cheese looking shredded Parmesan, so it's less than great. And news spitting rhymes from a different state. Follow Yellow Rose without a Tin Man and Jordan 8s. Yeah, that's on my middle of the map. Casey on my cap while all your favorite rappers capping. Realize the trap is meant to keep your niggas trapped in. Gentrify your block, but get upset to see your black skin. Yeah, and we still killing off our black kin. Let them rape us for our culture for some track spins. Just to get a bigger check, you doing back bends. That's how it happens. News.
Yeah.
Gotta snap in the mic here.
All right. Well, on that note, we are Black, Brown, and Bilingue. I am one of your hosts, Lisette Jacobson.
And I'm Maurice McDavid.
Muchas gracias for tuning in.
Adios.